All right, so we've got a whole stack of reports and policy documents here all about hydrogen in Europe.
It looks like, well, from what I've seen, just kind of skimming through it, it's a pretty complex topic, huh?
Oh yeah, it's definitely complex. A lot going on. There are folks out there like the team at Ingeniero Emprendedor and ingenieroemprendedor.com. They're really paying attention to this, and they're smart to be doing so. The EU has set some incredibly ambitious goals for hydrogen, but, the reality is, well, the reality on the ground is a little bit more complicated.
Right.
So I guess that's what we're going to try to unpack today in this deep dive, look at the gap between those ambitions and where things actually stand right now.
Okay, that's good.
We'll look at some of the challenges and the opportunities in actually scaling up production of hydrogen. And then I guess the other big question is, how is Europe planning to build all the infrastructure that you need to support this whole hydrogen dream?
Yeah, well, one thing that jumped out at me, even before I got into the details, was just how much less energy-dense hydrogen is compared to natural gas. Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it's like trying to pack the same punch with a pillow instead of a fist.
That's a great analogy. It really highlights a key challenge, a logistical challenge, right? But to understand the scale of this transition, I think we need to start with the EU's targets. So by 2030, the goal is to be producing 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen.
10 million. Wow. Okay.
Which is that's a gigantic leap from how much is currently produced using electrolysis, the main method for renewable hydrogen.
Right. And, one of the reports, I can't remember which one it was, but one of them pointed out that when you add up all the targets from each of the individual EU countries, it doesn't actually add up to that 10 million ton goal.
You're absolutely right. There is a pretty significant gap there.
It's like the EU is aiming for the summit of Mount Everest, but each country is kind of packing for a different altitude.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And that really underscores just how difficult it is to try to coordinate all the different national strategies. And it highlights the need for, some stronger EU-wide policies, right? If they really want to reach this goal, everybody needs to be on the same page.
Okay, so we've got this, huge production goal, but then what about cost? I mean, how does the cost of producing renewable hydrogen compare to sort of the more traditional ways of making hydrogen? I mean, green energy often comes with a green price tag, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the reports are pretty clear on that renewable hydrogen, which is the hydrogen made via electrolysis using renewable energy, is currently 3 to 4 times more expensive than hydrogen produced from fossil fuels.
Whoa. Okay. So what's driving that high cost? I mean, is there any hope of bringing it down?
So the two main things that are driving the costs up are, one is the cost of the electrolyzers themselves,
right?
Which those are the devices that are splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then the other one is the price of renewable electricity.
To power those electrolyzers.
Exactly, to power those electrolyzers. So those are the two big ticket items that need to come down in price. There is some good news, though. The first European Hydrogen Bank auction, it revealed some surprisingly low bids for renewable hydrogen production.
Oh, interesting. So does that mean the cost problem is already sort of starting to solve itself?
Well, not so fast. It is a really positive sign that you have producers out there that are, willing to take a risk, and they're betting that they can bring those costs down in the future. But the price gap between the renewable hydrogen and the fossil fuel-based hydrogen, it's pretty significant. So, for now, it's still a bit of a risky investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So given that cost gap, I know one of the reports brought up the idea of low-carbon hydrogen as a possible, I guess, a bridge solution, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So what is that exactly, and what are the trade-offs there?
So low-carbon hydrogen is basically, it's hydrogen that's produced from natural gas, but it's produced, using carbon capture technology to reduce the emissions. And, some people argue that it's a much more economically viable option, at least for now, in the short term, while the cost of renewable hydrogen is still so high.
Yeah, okay. It makes sense to explore different pathways. But are there downsides to going down that road? I mean, are there downsides to relying on this low-carbon hydrogen as a temporary fix?
So the main concern is what's called lock-in effects.
Mm-hmm.
If we invest too heavily in low-carbon hydrogen infrastructure right now, it could actually end up delaying the full transition to a fully renewable hydrogen economy in the long run. We could basically get stuck with a less sustainable solution just because it seems cheaper right now.
Yeah, it's like a classic dilemma. Right?
Yeah,
short-term affordability versus long-term sustainability. Okay, so Lots to think about. We've got these ambitious goals. We've got cost challenges. We've got this whole debate between renewable hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen. But even if we can figure out the production side of things, how do we move this stuff around? I mean, the infrastructure question seems like a pretty massive undertaking.
Oh, it's huge. We need to be thinking about pipelines and storage and how all of this connects to the energy infrastructure that we already have in place. One interesting thing that came up in a couple of the reports is that, Europe could potentially repurpose a lot of its existing natural gas pipelines to transport hydrogen instead. We're talking potentially 15,500 kilometers worth of pipelines could be repurposed, that's about 8% of the existing gas transmission network.
Whoa. Okay, so repurposing existing infrastructure is always a good idea if you can do it. But can we really just swap natural gas for hydrogen? I mean, they're very different, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And there are definitely some challenges. The reports go into some detail about some of those concerns. We need to make sure that these pipelines they're technically compatible, that they can handle hydrogen, in terms of the materials and, making sure that they're safe. Hydrogen behaves differently than natural gas, and we don't want any surprises. And then there are also some regulatory hurdles that need to be overcome, and potentially some pretty high costs associated with upgrading things like metering stations.
Right. So it sounds like repurposing existing pipelines could be part of the solution, but it's not just a simple plug-and-play situation. What about the electricity infrastructure? I mean, we've talked about how much renewable electricity you need to produce all this hydrogen, and those numbers were pretty staggering.
Yeah, I mean, to produce 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen by 2030, it would take about 550 terawatt hours of renewable electricity.
Wow.
Which is, to put that in perspective, that's a pretty sizable chunk of all the renewable electricity that the EU is currently producing.
Yeah, that's a huge energy demand.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about building hydrogen infrastructure. We need a whole parallel track of massive investments in renewable energy generation and grid expansion.
You got it. And that really highlights how interconnected all of this is, the gas infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure, and the hydrogen infrastructure. You can't think about them in isolation. It's all got to work together.
It's like creating a giant clean energy orchestra, and each instrument needs to be perfectly in tune. But, there might be a silver lining here. I know one of the reports mentioned that electrolyzers, the devices that are actually making the hydrogen, could maybe bring some flexibility to the electricity grid.
That's right, yeah. They could actually be used to help balance supply and demand, make the grid more resilient, better able to handle the ups and downs of renewable energy sources.
Okay, so that's an example of how thinking strategically about hydrogen can lead to some unexpected benefits.
Absolutely.
For the whole energy system. But with all this talk about infrastructure, what about storage? I mean, where are we going to put all this hydrogen? It's not like you can just stack it in a warehouse.
That is another big piece of the puzzle, and there are a few potential solutions on the table. One option is to repurpose existing natural gas storage facilities.
Okay.
But again, just like with the pipelines, we have to make sure that they're compatible, make sure that it's safe. And then there's the question of, capacity. Do we have enough existing storage space to accommodate all this hydrogen?
So repurposing is a possibility.
Yeah.
But we might need to get creative with some other storage solutions, maybe giant underground hydrogen balloons. I don't know, just brainstorming here.
We'll see about the balloons, but definitely, innovation in storage, it's going to be absolutely crucial as the hydrogen economy grows. And, this brings us back to the issue of coordinated planning, and not just at the national level, but across the whole European hydrogen landscape. The reports highlight all these different approaches that different countries are taking. Some are going all in on renewable hydrogen. Others are a little bit more hesitant.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag of enthusiasm across Europe.
It is, yeah. And that lack of uniformity can really complicate things, especially when you start thinking about cross-border projects.
Right. Like, imagine trying to build a hydrogen pipeline between two countries, and one's fully committed to hydrogen and the other one's kind of still on the fence.
Yeah, it'd be like trying to build a bridge where the two sides are moving at different speeds.
That's a recipe for disaster.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, coordinated planning is essential, not just within individual countries, but across the whole European hydrogen ecosystem. We need everybody on the same page if this is going to work.
I couldn't agree more. And that coordinated planning, it has to go beyond just hydrogen infrastructure. It needs to include the electricity grid, renewable energy production, and even industrial demand.
Right. It's all connected.
It's all got to work together.
It really is like composing a symphony of clean energy.
That's a great way to think about it.
And each instrument has to play its part
Exactly.
at the right time. And this isn't just about beautiful music. This is about powering Europe for decades to come.
That's right. And that symphony needs a conductor.
Yeah.
It needs somebody to set the tempo and guide all the different sections and make sure everybody is playing in sync.
Right.
That's where strong EU leadership really comes in.
Okay. So the EU is like the maestro of the hydrogen symphony. I love it. But let's not forget about the audience. What does all this mean for the average person? I mean, are we all going to be filling up our cars with hydrogen in a few years?
That's the question everybody wants to know the answer to, right?
Right.
And while personal, hydrogen-powered cars, they're definitely on the horizon, the reports suggest that the initial focus is probably going to be on the heavier applications, like trucks and buses, even ships.
Right.
Those sectors are a lot harder to decarbonize with just batteries alone. So hydrogen can really play a crucial role in making them cleaner.
So think like big rigs, city buses, and cargo ships running on hydrogen.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. That's a pretty impressive image.
It is.
But what about the everyday uses of energy that we all rely on, like heating our homes, powering our appliances? Will hydrogen be part of that picture too?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is possible, but it's not the most straightforward path. Remember that energy density issue we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, it makes using hydrogen for things like home heating more complex and potentially less efficient than some other solutions like electric heat pumps.
So maybe not hydrogen-powered toasters just yet.
Probably not.
But this brings us to a pretty crucial point, which is, if hydrogen is going to succeed, it has to be more than just a pipe dream. It has to make economic sense.
It does, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting because, as we've already discussed, there's this cost gap between renewable hydrogen and its fossil fuel-based rivals. And that is a major, major hurdle.
Right. Yeah, it's like trying to convince someone to buy a fancy electric car when a perfectly good gas guzzler is half the price.
Yeah, it's a tough sell.
It's a tough sell. So how do we make renewable hydrogen more competitive?
Well, as we've discussed, scaling up electrolyzer production is key.
Right.
The more we make, the cheaper they'll become.
Okay.
And the same principle applies to the production of renewable electricity itself.
So it's all about driving down costs through innovation and economies of scale?
Exactly. It's the classic tech startup playbook, right? Start small, iterate, and then scale.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not just about lowering production costs. We also have to create demand.
Right.
Right. We have to find applications where hydrogen really has a clear advantage over other options.
You got it. And the reports highlight some really promising areas, particularly in heavy industry.
Okay, so spill the beans. Where is hydrogen really poised to shine?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, heavy industry, steel making, cement production, chemical manufacturing, these are sectors that just require massive amounts of energy.
Right.
And they're really, really difficult to decarbonize. Hydrogen could really be a game changer there, especially if we can produce it cost effectively using renewable energy.
So we're talking green steel, green cement, and green chemicals, a whole new world of industrial possibilities, all powered by hydrogen.
That's right. And it's not just about replacing those existing processes.
Yeah.
Hydrogen could open the door to entirely new industries, entirely new products, things that we haven't even thought of yet.
Okay, now my mind is racing.
That's what makes it so exciting.
But let's come back to the present for a moment. One of the reports mentioned this idea of a hydrogen valley.
Yeah.
What is that exactly? And how does it fit into the bigger picture?
So a hydrogen valley is basically a regional ecosystem.
Okay.
Where you have hydrogen production and distribution and the actual utilization of the hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
It's all interconnected. It's like a mini hydrogen economy.
Okay.
Within a specific geographic area.
So it's like a testing ground for the hydrogen economy.
Yeah.
A place where different players can come together and try out new technologies and business models in the real world.
Exactly. They're designed to demonstrate that hydrogen can work across the different sectors and to create a blueprint for wider adoption.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a microcosm of the hydrogen future.
Yeah.
A place where we can we can experiment and learn before we try to scale things up to the national or even international level. Are there any hydrogen valleys already in operation, or are they mostly still in the planning stages?
There are a few that are up and running already
Okay.
in Europe, with more in various stages of development.
So these early projects, what are we learning from them? What are some of the key lessons?
Well, one of the key takeaways is the importance of collaboration and partnerships. A successful hydrogen valley really depends on close cooperation between industry, government, research institutions, local communities.
Yeah, it takes a village. It's a reminder that transitioning to a hydrogen economy isn't something that any one entity can do on its own.
Nope.
It requires a collective effort and bringing together lots of different expertise and perspectives.
Absolutely. Another important lesson is the need for flexibility and adaptability. I mean, the hydrogen landscape is changing so rapidly all the time. There are new technologies and applications emerging all the time.
So it's a dynamic space. So being able to pivot and adjust to those changes is going to be crucial.
It's going to be critical, yeah. And that's where innovation really comes in. We need to encourage research and development, support entrepreneurs and startups, create an environment where new ideas can really flourish.
So it's not just about building infrastructure, it's about fostering a culture of innovation around hydrogen.
Exactly. It's about creating an ecosystem, where bright minds can come together, they can collaborate, they can push the boundaries of what's possible. And that's where initiatives like Engenheiro Empreendedor and engenheiroempreendedor.com, they play such an important role.
Yeah, they're providing a platform for entrepreneurs and innovators to connect, to share ideas, and to access the resources they need to bring their hydrogen-powered visions to life.
They are, yeah.
It's really great to see that kind of support and enthusiasm for the hydrogen sector. And it's a reminder that, even though the challenges are significant, the opportunities are even greater.
I think so.
It's inspiring to see the passion and the dedication of the people that are working in this space.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, from the technical details of pipelines and storage to the broader economic and societal implications of the hydrogen transition. But there's one question that I keep coming back to, which is, what does all this mean for the average person? How will hydrogen actually impact our daily lives in the years to come?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's one that deserves, a thoughtful answer.
Mm-hmm.
While the initial focus of the hydrogen transition is likely going to be on heavy industry and these large-scale applications, eventually hydrogen will start to trickle down into our everyday lives.
In more subtle ways. Yeah. Think about it this way. When the internet first emerged, most people couldn't have imagined how profoundly it would transform their daily routines.
Right. It started with those clunky dial-up connections and email chains, and now it's hard to imagine life without smartphones and social media and streaming services.
Exactly. And hydrogen has the potential to unfold in a similar way. We might not be, filling up our cars with hydrogen next week, but over time, hydrogen is likely to become a much more important part of how we power our homes, our businesses, our transportation systems.
So it's not just about replacing fossil fuels, it's about creating a whole new energy ecosystem where hydrogen plays a key role alongside other renewable sources like solar and wind.
Exactly. It's about building a more resilient, more sustainable energy future, and hydrogen is a crucial piece of that puzzle.
All right, well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the technical nitty-gritty to the big picture opportunities and challenges of this hydrogen transition.
It has been a fascinating conversation, and I think we've given our listeners a solid foundation for understanding just how complex this is, but also all the potential that hydrogen has in Europe.
But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something that we touched on a little bit earlier, which is the role of individual initiative and entrepreneurship in driving this transition forward.
It's so important. The hydrogen economy isn't going to be built just by governments and large corporations. It's going to require the creativity, the passion, and the risk-taking spirit of entrepreneurs and innovators.
And that's where, resources like Engenheiro Empreendedor and engenheiroempreendedor.com become so valuable.
They are, yeah.
They're providing the tools and the connections that entrepreneurs need to thrive in this emerging hydrogen landscape.
They're helping to build a community of hydrogen enthusiasts, connecting the dots between, ideas and opportunities and fostering a real collaborative spirit.
Yeah, it's exciting to see that kind of energy and momentum building around hydrogen. It is. But we got to be realistic. There are still hurdles to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And the path forward isn't always going to be smooth.
That's true. There will be setbacks. There will be unexpected challenges. There will be moments where we have to kind of rethink our approach, adjust our course a little bit.
But I think that's part of what makes this whole journey so compelling.
Yeah.
We're not just following some predetermined roadmap.
Right.
We're charting a new course, experimenting, innovating, and figuring things out as we go.
And that's where the real excitement lies, in the unknown and the potential for discovery and the possibility of creating something that's truly transformative.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dives, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, which is, what role will you play in shaping this hydrogen future?
Will you be the one to develop the next big breakthrough technology?
Will you be the entrepreneur who launches the next big hydrogen-powered startup?
Or will you simply be an informed citizen, making, conscious choices that support this transition to a cleaner, more sustainable energy future?
The possibilities are endless, and the future is ours to create.
It really is. It reminds me a lot of the early days of the internet, where everybody knew it was going to be big, but nobody could predict exactly how it was all gonna play out.
Yeah, and just like the internet, hydrogen feels like it could touch so many different aspects of our lives. But, right now it's still early days, right? We're still figuring out the best path forward.
We are. Yeah.
Speaking of paths, one of the reports actually dug into how different EU countries are approaching their hydrogen strategies. And it seems like there's quite a range of approaches out there.
There is. And, that variety is both fascinating and potentially a bit of a challenge. You have countries like Germany that are really going all in on renewable hydrogen, setting these ambitious targets, investing a lot of money in green technologies. And then you have others that are taking a more, I guess you could call it a measured approach, maybe waiting to see how the technology develops, how the market develops before they fully commit.
So you've got the early adopters kind of forging ahead, and then you've got others who are taking a more, wait-and-see approach. I can see how that can create some tension, especially when it comes to, cross-border projects and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're trying to build a hydrogen pipeline between two countries, and one is totally gung-ho about hydrogen and the other one is still kind of hesitant, that can lead to some complications.
It'd be like trying to build a bridge where one side is moving at a different speed than the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to be mindful of that. But even if we get all the EU countries on the same page, are there other major roadblocks that could slow down this hydrogen transition?
One of the biggest ones, aside from the cost of production that we talked about earlier, is public perception and awareness. Right now, hydrogen is still a relatively new concept for a lot of people, and to really get wider acceptance and support, I think we need to do a better job of educating the public about the benefits of hydrogen, address any safety concerns that they might have, and just demonstrate how hydrogen can contribute to a cleaner, more sustainable energy future.
Yeah, it's all about building trust and understanding, and I imagine that's where clear communication and transparency, from policymakers and industry leaders is going to be so important.
Absolutely. People need to feel confident that this transition is being handled responsibly,
right,
and that their interests are being taken into account.
Okay. So we've talked about some of the challenges, but let's shift gears a little bit and focus on the opportunities. What are some of the most exciting potential applications for hydrogen that you see on the horizon?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, heavy industry is a prime candidate. Steel making, cement production, chemical manufacturing, these are all processes that require just enormous amounts of energy, and they're incredibly difficult to decarbonize using the methods that we have today. Hydrogen offers a potential pathway to making these industries much, much cleaner and more sustainable.
It's amazing to think that we could have green steel, green cement, green chemicals. It's like a whole new industrial revolution, but powered by hydrogen.
It is, yeah. And the potential goes beyond just, replacing those existing processes. Hydrogen could also enable the creation of entirely new industries, entirely new products, things that we haven't even imagined yet.
Okay, now my mind is racing with possibilities. But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. One of the reports mentioned this idea of a hydrogen valley.
Yeah.
What is that exactly, and how does it fit into this bigger picture that we're talking about?
So a hydrogen valley is essentially, it's a regional ecosystem
Okay.
where you have hydrogen production and distribution and utilization all interconnected. So it's like a mini hydrogen economy
Okay.
within a specific geographic area.
So it's like a testing ground for the hydrogen economy.
It is, yeah.
A place where different players can come together and try out new technologies, try out new business models in a real world setting.
Exactly. They're designed to demonstrate that hydrogen can actually work
Mm-hmm.
across different sectors and to create a blueprint for wider adoption.
That makes a lot of sense. It's
Yeah.
like a microcosm of the hydrogen future.
Yeah.
A place where we can experiment and learn before we try to scale things up to the national or even international level. Are there any hydrogen valleys that are already in operation? Or are they mostly still in the planning stages?
There are a handful that are already up and running in Europe and many more in various stages of development.
Okay.
So these early projects, I mean, they're providing some really valuable insights into the technical, the economic, and the social aspects of hydrogen deployment.
So it's not just theoretical. These are real world experiments happening right now.
They are, yeah.
What are we learning from these early hydrogen valleys? What are some of the key lessons that are emerging?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of collaboration
Mm-hmm.
and partnerships.
Yeah.
A successful hydrogen valley really depends on close cooperation between industry, government, research institutions, and local communities.
It really is a reminder that this transition to a hydrogen economy, it's not something that any one entity can achieve on its own. It requires a collective effort, bringing together lots of different expertise, different perspectives.
You got it. Another really important lesson is that we need to be flexible and adaptable. The hydrogen landscape is evolving so rapidly. There are new technologies and applications popping up all the time.
So it's a very dynamic space, and being able to pivot and adjust to those changes is going to be critical.
It's critical, yeah. And that's where innovation comes in. We need to encourage research and development, support entrepreneurs, support startups, create an environment where new ideas can flourish.
So it's not just about building the infrastructure. It's also about fostering a culture of innovation around hydrogen.
It is, yeah. It's about creating an ecosystem where bright minds can come together and collaborate and really push the boundaries of what's possible with hydrogen. And that's where initiatives like Ingeniero Emprendedor and ingenieroemprendedor.com play such an important role.
Right. Yeah, they're providing a platform for entrepreneurs and innovators to connect, to share ideas, and to access the resources that they need to bring their hydrogen-powered visions to life.
They are.
It's great to see that kind of support and enthusiasm for the hydrogen sector. And it's a reminder that even though the challenges are significant, the opportunities are even greater.
I agree. I think they are.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
You're from the technical nitty-gritty of pipelines and storage to the broader economic and societal implications of this whole hydrogen transition. But there's one question I keep coming back to, which is, what does all this mean for the average person? How will hydrogen actually impact our daily lives in the years to come?
Yeah, it really does feel like we're at a turning point. It's not just about swapping out one fuel source for another. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's about reimagining our whole energy system.
Exactly. And that reimagining, it requires us to think beyond just the technology itself.
Mm-hmm.
We need to consider the social, economic, and political dimensions of this transition as well.
One of the things that really jumped out at me reading through all these reports was just the sheer scale of the investments that are going to be needed to make this hydrogen economy a reality. I mean, we're talking billions, maybe even trillions of dollars globally.
Yeah, no, it's a massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it. And it raises some really big questions. Where's all that funding going to come from? How is it going to be allocated? Who's going to benefit?
Yeah, it's like a giant game of chess with governments and corporations and investors and researchers all kind of vying for position.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And just like in chess, strategy is key.
Yeah.
The players that can anticipate the next move, who can adapt to changing circumstances, who can forge the right partnerships, they're the ones who are going to succeed in this new energy era.
So it's not just about, the technological innovation. It's also about strategic thinking, about collaboration, about a willingness to embrace new approaches.
I think so, yeah. We have to be open to new ideas, willing to experiment, and ready to learn from our mistakes along the way.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that this transition isn't going to be a straight line. There are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be unexpected detours and moments where we have to, kind of course correct.
But I think that's part of what makes it so exciting. We're not just following a script that someone's already written. We're writing the story as we go.
Yeah. It's an adventure with all the uncertainty and the challenges, but also the potential for amazing discoveries along the way.
That's what I find so inspiring about the hydrogen space. There's a real pioneering spirit, a sense of possibility, and a genuine belief that we can create a better future through innovation and through collaboration.
It's contagious. I mean, even just spending a few hours digging into these reports, I can feel that energy and optimism rubbing off on me.
It's hard not to get caught up in the excitement, but, amidst all the hype, it's important to stay grounded, I think, and to approach this transition with a healthy dose of realism.
Right. I mean, we've talked a lot about the potential benefits of hydrogen, but it's also important to acknowledge that there are potential risks.
Yeah.
And we need to address those proactively.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of the environmental impact of hydrogen production, especially if it relies on fossil fuels. We need to make sure that this transition is socially just, that the benefits are shared equitably. And we have to be really vigilant about safety, especially as hydrogen becomes more widely used, in our homes, our workplaces, and our transportation systems.
So it's not just about embracing the positive. It's about being responsible stewards of this technology and making sure that its development aligns with our values and our long-term goals.
That's right. It's about finding that balance, between pushing the boundaries of innovation, but also safeguarding the well-being of our planet and its people.
It's a complex equation, but I think it's one that we're capable of solving if we approach it with the right mindset. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of hydrogen, I want to leave our listeners with a renewed sense of hope and a call to action.
This transition to a hydrogen-powered future, it's not some distant dream. It's happening right now.
And each one of us has a role to play in shaping that future, whether it's through our work, our investments, or simply the choices that we make every day.
If you're feeling inspired by the possibilities of hydrogen, there are so many ways to get involved. You can support companies that are developing hydrogen technologies. You can advocate for policies that promote the growth of the hydrogen economy. And if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, you can even join the ranks of the innovators who are building this hydrogen future, just like the folks at Ingeniero Emprendedor and ingenieroemprendedor.com.
The hydrogen revolution is an invitation to reimagine what's possible and to create a world where clean, sustainable energy powers our lives and fuels our dreams. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.